Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Tommo, and welcome to my 2024 Hungarian Grand Prix pre-race Chinwag. Thank you everyone who's here live on YouTube. Christopher, Mikto, Ewan, Helita, Kleiner, Hagen, Rayner, Kevin, Dimmy, Thomas, JBH, Adrian, Sem. Thank you to everyone who's joining me after the fact as well on YouTube, and everyone who's audio only, right? Just for your lugs, listening in, right? I can show off my lugs a bit more because I've had a haircut. Oh, I need to get haircuts more often, man. Because when my hair starts growing out, I really don't like it. I much prefer it when I've had a bit of a trim. How are we doing, everyone? How are we? Well, Dimmy, Rayner, Kevin, Thomas, JBH, Adrian, P, Jerome, Christopher, Priest, Alexa. It's good to be back. It's good to be back live. Although I'm sure you all watched my video yesterday, right? My video about the driver transfer market being absolute chaos. Yeah, I'm sure you did watch it. It's a 1 out of 10, which as a YouTuber, that's like straight in the veins. That is immediately into the veins when you hit a 1 out of 10. Love it. Right, anyway, let's talk all about this weekend's Hungarian Grand Prix, shall we? Round 13 of the 2024 Formula One season. This will be the first race of the second half of the season, even though obviously the summer break is still yet to happen. We've got Hungary, then we've got Monza, then we've got a few weeks off. And I'm sure over that time we'll get a lot of those driver transfer rumours put to bed. A decision made on Checo, maybe a decision made by Carlos, and I'm sure that will set a lot of things in motion. Right, excellent. Hungary. Oh, was it Spa? For some reason, I keep thinking it's Hungary and Monza. That's not the first time I've done that. It's Hungary and Spa. My bad. Why do I keep thinking it's Hungary and Monza? Anyway, skill issue, I guess. That is, isn't it? But no, we're not at Spa or Monza this weekend. Back at the Hungarian, a race that I was fortunate enough to attend last year. And I met a bunch of you guys there as well. I did a little video there, didn't I? Getting your hot takes, your spicy thoughts, which was good fun. Not there this year. Apparently it's going to be absolutely roasting again. It was last year. Great Grand Prix to visit. Budapest, beautiful city as well. Isn't it Budapest? Budapest, I think. That's the proper way. Daniel, yes, of course. Daniel, you were there. As per, of course. It was a good time, wasn't it, mate? Good time. You going this year? But yeah, get ready for the heat. Get your sun cream. This massive forehead would be prime for some sunburn if I was there. But I'm not. It's pretty good weather in the UK right now. Oh, it was raining yesterday, but today it's pretty nice weather. So anyway, moving on. Hungarian Grand Prix, good, fairly well priced as well in terms of an accessible Grand Prix to get to. What I would say is getting out is a nightmare. The queue for the cabs is like 4 hours. It's actually ridiculous trying to get out of the venue. If I was to go again, I would, when the race is finished, just have a party with the Verstappen fans. Just get on it with the Verstappen fans. You know, have a few bevies, have some fun, hang around until you actually need to leave, and then the queues have died down by then. But yeah, as a Grand Prix to visit compared to, Silverstone and Montreal, it's simple. It's not too extravagant, but then, it's a cheaper price as well, and you're still getting that experience. And you're really close to the track, actually. I was sat down at turn 1 at the hairpin, and I was surprised by how close I felt to the track, because whenever I've been to, Silverstone or Miami or any of these others, you don't get that same sense of really being close to it. And it's very old-fashioned as well, which I quite like. There's some charm to it. But the infrastructure, getting in and out of the track is a nightmare. So... yeah, if anyone else is going to indulge in that Grand Prix this year, then keep that in mind. Have they not done anything? The thing is, Aaron, I don't think you can do too much to change that part of it anyway, because of where it is. It is pretty close to Budapest, and yeah, the roads in and out are just. I guess they could build and extend and widen roads and that. But that's a big infrastructure project for the sake of a Grand Prix. But I would, I'd welcome it for sure. So what happened last time then in 2023 when I was sat down at turn 1? Well, it was quite the Saturday. Qualifying, Lewis Hamilton putting it on pole by 0.003 of a second over Max Verstappen. It's interesting actually as well because I was lucky to go to Austria last year as well, which geographically is not particularly far from Hungary. The Hungaroring and Spielberg, not particularly far distance-wise, yet the fans were a complete different variety. In Austria, it was almost entirely Max fans, at least 85, probably more like 90% Max fans in Austria. In Hungary, the biggest cheer of the weekend was when Lewis put it on pole. A lot of Lewis fans, a big mixture actually, to be fair. A very diverse range of drivers getting support in Hungary, which was cool. But then, of course, come Sunday, well, turn one at Hungary is always a bit of a nightmare, isn't it? We've had, obviously, Bottas and Stroll bowling back in 2021. This time it was Zhou Guanyu, who had a quality qualifying, P5 in quali, Zhou. Bogged down off the start, ended up pushing Ricciardo into one of the Alpines, which then went into the other Alpine. So Alpine's double DNF'd, which was an absolute howler. And Oscar made a move up the inside as well. You had Lewis and Lando scrapping into turn one, and Oscar kind of he jumped on the opportunity. But as the race panned out, and McLaren did undercut Norris to get ahead of Oscar, and Oscar's race pace was nowhere near Lando's, although he think he was carrying a bit of damage from his scrapping with Sergio Perez. But either way, this was back when Oscar was really struggling with his tyre management. So it'll be good to see how he is relative to Lando this year, because this was a track he really struggled relative to Lando in the race last. But yeah, it was a pretty convincing, pretty comfortable Max win at the end. There was a few little storylines going on throughout the race, but Checo managed to get up to P3, which is well needed right now for Sergio Perez. Another P3 would be phenomenal. And I mean, Ferrari were struggling then, right, and they're still struggling now, somewhat, aren't they? But yeah, last time it wasn't a barnstormer of a race by any stretch, but there were some interesting storylines going on. I think given the convergence of the field now, and I know Hungary is a difficult track to overtake on, but I'm confident this weekend will be good. Will be good, all right. So where do we stand in the championship? 50% of the way through the season, Max Verstappen has a 84-point gap to Lando Norris. Maths. Who has a 21-point gap to Charles Leclerc, who hasn't scored 3 races in a row. So, yeah, all that early momentum for Charles was absolutely flatlined. But Mercedes have caught up. Who knows, maybe Ferrari will have learned from last race, almost turning that into some kind of testing session to kind of understand their upgrades, because obviously they took the upgrades off of Charles' car, which contributed to why he struggled and didn't get out of Q2. Yeah, you've got to think that, well, obviously we've talked about it. I've done my video on why I don't think Lando and McLaren are ready for a title fight. You know, they need to use these next 12 races to really stress test both Lando. Because I do think, you know, if they give him the opportunities, he will take them more often than he won't. But it's a team effort. He can work on his communication skills. McLaren can certainly work on theirs. And, you know, if they want to fight in 25, the infrastructure at Red Bull, the infrastructure at Mercedes is way more tried and tested fighting for a championship than it is at McLaren. So they need to get on top of it quick. You know, I'm not suggesting they swap out Will Joseph at all. But what I am saying is that if they don't learn from these instances, then what are they doing? What are they playing at, you know? Otherwise, championship-wise, Sainz only 4 points behind Leclerc. And again, he already missed a race, didn't he, in Saudi? Which says a lot for Charles' recent struggles as well, because Charles was top 4 for the first 8 events in a row, including sprints, which is very crikey indeed, George Russell, exactly. Checo only 8 points ahead of Lewis Hamilton in P8. And again, if the rumours around his future are to be believed in terms of the exit clause in his contract. He can't be more than 100 points behind Max by the summer break. He's 137 behind. And he can't be lower than P5 in the driver's standings. He's P6. 6 points off of P5. 8 points ahead of P8. So it's not looking good, Brev. I think's the apt saying for Checo. And do I have any logic? Do I have anything to look at to suggest that he will turn it around in these next 2 races? And he's on the ropes. Honestly, a bigger part of me at this stage, because even if he does for 2 races and somehow, gets P5 and closes that gap to Max, this is just going to just end this pain, please. Like, I'm sure any Checo fans out there, you can't be you can't be watching this and enjoying this and wanting this to continue. I mean, I was there with Alex in 2020. Like, a big part of me was, even though he was out of the sport, I was kind of relieved the pain would end. And fortunately, Alex has got an opportunity to get back in and rebuild his reputation. But I don't know, I feel like if I was a Checo fan, I'd rather be watching him doing bits in IndyCar or IMSA or something. Yeah, I don't know. Otherwise, not too much to obviously the bottom lot. Ocon, Albon, Magnussen, Gasly, all a point between them. Still plenty to fight for in the Constructors' Championship, of course. Sauber, eyes on Sauber this weekend, because they absolutely flew around the Hungarian last year. Again, Joe P5 in qualifying. Bottas, I think, was P7. And so double Sauber, maybe they're a bit of a speciality. They're the specialists around this big go-kart track that is essentially... I mean, to be fair, Bottas 21, that also did happen. But, he's in a Sauber now, and he's actually driving very well. And I think definitely merits a seat going forward. Do you think he'll get replaced mid-season? I think, all of the talk we've heard from Helmut and the words from Christian as well suggest that, if these 2 races don't suggest a significant uptick in performance, then I think they'll just chuck Ricciardo in. I do. I don't think there's too much to lose from doing that. Racing Bulls and Haas split by just 4 points now. Haas, great momentum going into this weekend as well. Hulkenberg's been scoring points left, right and centre. Maybe even Aston Martin have to worry about the Haas resurgence. You've almost got Alpine, Williams, Sauber. Is that, well, to be fair, I would put... No, because Alpine can have a good weekend. I would actually put Alpine in with the Aston Martin Racing Bulls Haas group. And then I'd say Williams and Sauber are kind of on their own as the worst. Even though the points don't reflect that for Alpine, I think, Gasly had the 50 place grid drop and broke down in Silverstone. Ocon was starting towards the back and actually recovered pretty well. Will Yuki never get a Red Bull seat? I think he would already be in that seat by now if Christian Horner and Helmut Marko saw Yuki as part of their long-term future, and I think it's quite clear that they don't. So even though he does deserve it and he merits it more than Daniel Ricciardo, I don't think that's going to be the decision that they'll make. I think Red Bull will justify it being that, Daniel used to be in this car, this Red Bull, and he used to be really good, and his driving style will suit this Red Bull more than Yuki, and Sergio's driving style will suit this Red Bull, blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. All that, right. Otherwise, Red Bull gap to... Well, I mean, Ferrari got to kind of take them off the table now. That Red Bull gap to McLaren is 78 points. It just depends how much Checo honks. That's the thing, right? Because it is only honking right now. Also, obviously, Hungary's pretty curby, I would say, which may hurt the Red Bull somewhat. Again, that weakness that the Red Bull since the ground effect eras it was coming. It's always had that weakness on the curbs, but because it's been so complete elsewhere and so dominant elsewhere, we've not really seen that weakness be exposed like it is now. Hungary's got some big curbs. It's got the little chicane. Maybe that could somewhat hurt them. This weekend. But Only time will tell. Only time will tell. I can't believe Sauber still have nil points. Nil points. Well, Bottas should have got points in Canada. Not Canada, China, but he broke down. He probably would have got black P10, so maybe he'd have got a point. But yeah, time will tell. Right, okay, cool, excellent. Predictions time. Starting with mine, ending with yours. 2024 Hungarian Grand Prix. How do I think it's going to pan out? Who is my race winner? Well, the last 2 years in a row, a Mercedes has gone on pole at the Hungarian. Now, of course, Mercedes have struggled in this ground effect era. 2022 was in the absolute mud. Awful car. 2023, better, but still not great. Now that they've got on top of things, it has to be a Mercedes driver I'm predicting on pole. And as much as Lewis is a specialist around here, it was George who put it on pole in 22. So George Russell, I'm going to say, puts it on pole and wins the race. That's my prediction. Banger drive. Well, again, last year, Sauber did bit of a specialist track for them. And there's one driver at Sauber driving much better than the other. Wasn't the case, I think, for the last 2 years. I think it was pretty close. But this year, that gap has very much extended. Valtteri Bottas is my banger drive. I predicted him banger drive last week as well. I do think he's driving really well, Valtteri. And I think this will be the track that can actually bring him out, you know. Bring him out. Merc in the heat, not sure. Yeah, well, true. But, I mean, Mercedes, you know, it was hot last year in Hungary. Trust me, I was there. I had the sunburn to prove it. But they still, obviously not so much in the race, of course. In qualifying, I think a Mercedes 1-2 is very, very likely. In the race, it's obviously a different matter. But this car has improved. They've found something, right? So, time will tell. Time will tell. Thank you, Elliot, for the super chat. Albon win in Hungary or England win the Euros? Albon. Well, I guess the question is, Elliot, what's more likely to happen again? You know, if I pick Albon to win in Hungary, will England win a major competition in my lifetime? If I pick England to win, will Albon ever win a race again in F1? I would probably pick Albon win in Hungary because I think England, if we get Pep or Klopp or Lee Carsley, then we've got a good chance to bring it home. You know, we've got a good chance to bring it home. Either way, both are very unlikely, but you know, I'm going Albon win because I think Williams winning is less likely than England realistically. So banger drive Valtteri Bottas, clanger drive this weekend. Momentum's been poor. You got to think the rot's got to stop at some point, but now that Mercedes have jumped up as well, I think it's going to be another difficult weekend for the team in red. And typically when things get a bit tricky, Carlos seems to find a way through it better than Charles Leclerc. So I'm going to go Charles clanger this weekend. And as for banger team, well, kind of my Valtteri Bottas prediction kind of suggests that I'm going to say Sauber. I think Sauber will score at least a point this weekend. That's my out there prediction. Okay, Sauber will score at least un point this weekend. Remains to be seen. The chance of nothing unlikely happening is in itself unlikely. Hear me out. And then finally, clanger team, Ferrari. I think it will go one or two ways. Again, they're struggling with an upgrade that hasn't worked as they anticipated. If they've got on top of it, they could be in a good position. But compared to McLaren, compared to Mercedes, obviously their trajectory as well, it's hard for me to really believe that. So, yeah. Ferrari clang, Sauber bang, George win. Bosh. Bosh. Right. What about your predictions? These are mine. Let's look at yours. 1,519 of you voted. Thank you very much for voting. Very, very kind of you. Very, very kind. And your race winner, with 32% of the vote, is Max Verstappen. 22% Lewis Hamilton, 19% Oscar Piastri, 16% Lando Norris. You Australians always vote it, always backing your boy Oscar. I respect it. He's always up there. Because Banger Drive is Oscar Piastri. Of course it is. You always vote Oscar. Again, it will be very interesting to see whether he can plug that race pace deficit that he demonstrated last year he had to Lando. I think he's made big steps in that. I think he's driven exceptionally this year. I think he'll be a lot closer to Lando. Will he be quicker? It's a big ask, but maybe. Welcome, Griffin. First time joining the live. Love it. If you're first time joining the live, let me know in the chat. Big up everyone who's here. 913 actually of you here. I just jumped by like 84 people. Right. So Oscar Piastri, 22% of the vote for Banger Drive, 18% Lewis Hamilton, 9% Charles Leclerc, 7% Daniel Ricciardo. Like I said, the door is open. Checo has opened the door. He's rolled out the carpet to Daniel Ricciardo to take his seat. And Daniel isn't walking through it. Come on, Daniel. Make it happen, son. Come on. This is your only chance for any kind of redemption at the end of your F1 career to get back into that Red Bull seat. Because I believe his driving style, what works for him, will align more with what that Red Bull needs. I think. I could be wrong, but I think. And I think Red Bull should have enough data to make that call. As well as whether Liam's style and Yuki's style can work with that RB20. Because some cars, you look at the McLaren back in the day when Jenson and Lewis were teammates. Jenson's talked about this quite a lot recently. How him and Lewis had very different ways of driving. Lewis would be very, what's the word? He'd be very, almost like binary with the pedals. It's like smash on the brake and then like smash on the throttle, and he'd control the car with the steering wheel more. Whereas Jenson would modulate the brake, modulate the throttle, and just be very smooth with the steering wheel. Now, they're probably two extremes. And clearly that McLaren back in the day, because Lewis and Jenson were pretty close when they were teammates at McLaren, that car could be driven in both ways and driven to a very high standard. I don't feel like that's the case with the Red Bull. I think that was the case with, say, the 2020 Mercedes. That seemed like a very, very balanced, very a car you could drive in different ways. It felt like it was a more balanced platform, whereas the Red Bull is a more tricky platform. But if it goes fast, it goes fast. If it goes fast, it goes fast. Clanger Drive for you lot. 34% of the vote. No surprise. Sergio Perez. 9% Lando Norris, 6% Daniel Ricciardo, 6% Joe Guan Yu. I hope this isn't the case for Checo, but also part of me kind of hopes that he is dropped mid-season, to be honest, because I just prolong the inevitable, prolong the pain and suffering, just keep him in the car to the rest of the year, and he just keeps getting beaten. And at least if they drop him mid-season, he's got an opportunity to go to another team. Maybe Williams look at him and be like, oh, he could be perfect. Because he ticks a lot of boxes for Williams. So, proven mid-team driver. And obviously brings a lot of financial backing with him as well. So, yes, I think that is actually Checo's. I said this in my video. I think that's his best chance of staying in F1. So, yeah, I kind of hope he does get dropped, because I think that's his best chance of actually staying in the sport. And, you put Ricciardo in Banger and Clanger. Interesting. Banger team, Mercedes, 32% of the vote. Again, very good record around here, Mercedes, at least over a lap. And now that their race car seems to have caught up, they're in a good position. 25% McLaren, 13% Ferrari. There is belief. Tifosi, I respect it. I respect the delusion. And 9% Haas. Haas always overestimating, overperforming, especially with a certain Nico Hülkenberg at the wheel. And then finally, Klanger team, 21% of the vote, Sauber. 16% Aston Martin, 14% Ferrari, 9% Williams. 9% Williams. Sauber, Klanger. Look, last year, they slapped around here, at least in quali. So, and they both had bad. Obviously, Joe had his anti-stall kick in, and Bottas didn't have a great. Well, Bottas got held up because he was right behind Joe because there was 5th and 7th, and so he had to go round Joe, so he had to get out of the throttle a bit. So yeah, I think you're going to be wrong about Sauber this weekend. I actually do. I think that there's clearly something. There's knowledge in that team of how to go quick around this track. So even if their base car's rubbish, I think they're in a good place to maximise this weekend. But yeah, so those are your predictions for the 2024 Hungarian Grand Prix. Max win, Oscar banger, Checo clanger, Mercedes banger, Sauber clanger, and mine are completely different. George Russell win, Valtteri Bottas banger, Leclerc clanger, Sauber banger, Ferrari clanger. There you go. Thank you, Alex, for the super chat. Remains biggest bottle of 2023. What's that? The Joe anti-stall. Is that the biggest bottle of 23? I mean, that was a big bottle, to be fair. Significant L taken by Joe Guan Yu that time out. Cool. All right. Excellent. Amazing. What's the time? It's 5 to 12. We've been going for 27 minutes. We've gone through predictions. Well, what else we got to talk about? I think Ocon's announcement at Haas seems to be imminent. From all of the journo chat on Twitter, Andrew Benson put out an article talking about it in a pretty matter-of-fact way. So I think Ocon to Haas is inevitable, which, like I said in my video, I think that is actually quite a good thing from Ferrari and Behrman's point of view, because it's going to be a challenge for Ollie. I think Ocon's going to be a bigger challenge than Magnussen would have been. And not only in terms of Esteban's performance, Esteban's talent behind the wheel, because I think Esteban is the more talented driver compared to Kevin, but also, if things do get a bit naughty between the two of them, look, it's good experience for Ollie, and to go through that and to see how he manages a teammate. As much as if Esteban doesn't play ball, I like to think he will have learnt from what's gone on and maybe take on things a bit differently. He won't want to sour this relationship with Haas immediately, right? Because most of the time, he's not beefing with his teammate. It's just when it does happen, it's quite high profile. But the vast majority of the time, he's fine. And so, yeah, I think part of it is a bit overblown, but also if it does get a bit saucy, then Ollie, let's see how Ollie, responds to that, and whether he, how he conducts himself, because that's part of being an F1 driver is being a teammate. So it would just be interesting. It would be an interesting challenge for the bear that is Ollie. Anything else? Any other things going on? Any other chatter? We had all the sprint races for next year announced, actually, and they dropped Austria, which I'm gutted about, because I felt like that was the pinnacle sprint event for me, Austria. I feel like track really suited the format, and I think the sprint's always been really good around Austria, so I'm a bit disappointed that's been moved, but it's commercial. There's no, I've seen looking at it and being like, oh, well, I wonder if they've picked that because of the overtaking. They're picking the sprint tracks for commercial reasons. They're picking the sprint tracks that want the sprint tracks and have the money to pay for them. I see no other real justification for. I mean, why would you drop Austria otherwise? It's a banger. It's an absolute banger. Do I have a controversial opinion, Luke? No. None of my opinions are controversial. Not a single one. Not a single. Every opinion I have is perfectly aligned with the average person. I am the king of sitting on the fence. That's all I do, Luke. That is all I do. Do both Haas have the upgrades? I mean, I would imagine so. There's no excuse for them to not both have the upgrades. Of course, Hulk did and Magnussen didn't for the race last time out. So I've got no reason to believe they wouldn't both have the upgrades. No reason whatsoever. Not a fan of the sprint in Spa. Yeah, I think Spas are weird. I mean, Spa's a historic track, and it's a great challenge for the drivers. And even though it's so different to Monaco, it's similar in the way that it's historic, and it's not great for overtaking, and the racing typically isn't that crazy exciting. But again, as these regulations converge the cars, will it make tracks that have historically, or at least in the recent history, been a bit dull, actually make them a bit exciting? Because I think some tracks were really exposed for their weaknesses by, a very spread out Formula One, whereas a very condensed Formula One, Monaco's never going to be an incredible wheel-to-wheel race, no matter how close the field spread is. There's never going to be an incredible race. But a track like Spa, I think reserve judgment until we've actually seen it with all these, with at least 3, maybe 4 if Ferrari pull their finger out. Teams competitive and potentially able to win races at the front. Lovely. Thank you, Emmanuel, by the way. Tommo the Enlightened Centrist. That's me all over, Emmanuel, the Enlightened Centrist. I love that. Smaller cars. Well, look, Matthew, the cars will be getting smaller in 26, not by much, but also, safety standards are what they are for a reason. And I think reducing the length of the car is good. I don't think I think the width is kind of, you need that width. You need that physical car around the driver to really protect them, especially the speeds that those hybrids are going to be kicking out in a straight line. I'm quietly confident. Yeah, they've obviously bloated to an incredibly unnecessary size in the pursuit of aerodynamic, perfection. But actually, we want close racing first and foremost. Sure, the technological challenge is a big part of Formula One and should remain a big part of Formula One. It's a big part of the sport's DNA and what sets it apart from most other motorsports. But let's actually make it interesting on track, shall we? Please, I beg. Halt to Red Bull till the end of 2024, maybe. Well, Red Bull could buy out any contract they like. For Nico, the thing is, right? The thing is, with Red Bull, they know they have a car that, I was saying this earlier, right? They know they have a car that's tricky. They know they have a car that requires a certain driving style to really extract it. Because we've seen Gasly, we've seen Albon, and we've seen Checo all really struggle in pace. Not just relative to Max, that's the thing. That is the thing, right? They've really struggled in that Red Bull relative to the other 18 drivers. Not even Max. Average qualifying position for Checo and for Alex and for Pierre over all of their times is, in the P5, P6, P7, that kind of range. So completely ignoring the Max factor, when anyone but Max is driving that car, and we've had 3 examples of that now, and 3 drivers who are in F1 now, and, well, again, Checo before he went to Red Bull, glowing reputation. Alex and Pierre now, both of Williams and Alpine have kind of banked their hopes on these 2 drivers, so they're clearly not mugs. What is the guarantee? There is no guarantee that if they put Hülkenberg in that car, is his style going to work with this RB20? Or is he going to go from very highly regarded as he is right now and then get into that Red Bull and then just have the same issues that Checo's had? Because Checo's reputation before he went to Red Bull Checo's reputation in 2020 was at least as glowing. I remember that season being like, oh my God, Checo was sick this year. He was so good. He got that win. He should have got that podium at the last race, but he broke down. He was so good in 2020. You put him in the Red Bull and he was never on pace near Max, realistically. So is like if they do that, it's easy to look at Hulkenberg's performances right now and be like, oh yeah, he'd be sick. But Red Bull need a driver that I could argue in a lot of ways, a younger driver who's more green, and you can just introduce them to this style of car and like nothing else. And obviously Liam's done loads of sim work. He's got, a lot of that experience with this RB20, even if it is just in a simulator. Like, these simulators are so sophisticated now. Or an older experienced driver, but almost like specifically Daniel Ricciardo, because he used to be at that team. That Red Bull philosophy-wise, in terms of, yes, obviously regulations have changed since he was at Red Bull in 2018 last, but, they were all Adrian Newey founded cars, and they all had similar, pointy on the nose, high rake, obviously, back in the day. So, to go outside of their pool, and that's what I say about Carlos Sainz to Red Bull as well. Like, Carlos Sainz, we've seen this at Ferrari. Charles prefers that Ferrari when it's a bit more on the nose. Carlos prefers that Ferrari when it's a bit more understeery. The RB20 is the most on-the-nose car. Like, Max is the most on-the-nose driver in F1. So if Carlos goes into that Red Bull, I'm not convinced that he's going to be able to get on top of that. I could be wrong. Obviously, he was part of Toro Rosso back in the day, so they'll have some historical data of Carlos. But he spent most of his career, he went from Toro Rosso to Renault, then to McLaren, now to Ferrari. Like, he spent the vast majority of his career not in a Red Bull car, and he never even got to the actual Red Bull. He was in the Toro Rosso, which they are and always have been different cars. So that's why I would say, if I was Christian Horner, the two drivers of anyone out there that I would have the most confidence about putting in, probably most would be Liam Lawson, because of all of the sim work he's done, all of the back end work he's done for years now at that team. And Daniel, even though he doesn't deserve it over Yuki, I think, he's driven that Red Bull before alongside Max. Different regulations, sure, but like an on-the-nose Red Bull, I've got more reason to believe that. And look, Red Bull should have the data on Yuki. They should have the data on Yuki Tsunoda. Maybe if Max wraps up the title with a couple of races to go, you can chuck Yuki in just to see how he does in Max's car. And Daniel's been there before, yeah, exactly. And obviously he brings a lot of commercial benefit and value to that team, just like Checo does. But we don't know. Like, that's the thing, and I kept saying that in my video yesterday. Watch it if you haven't already. These teams have all the data that they should need. Jack Doohan, Alpine should have all the data they need on Jack Doohan to know how he would stack up relative to Pierre and Esteban, and whether he is the right driver to go in alongside Pierre and either be a comfortable number two or actually be close to Pierre. They have that data. We're not privy to that, but they are. Red Bull with the data on Perez, on Ricciardo, on Tsunoda. If they're going to replace Checo, well, they will only replace Checo if they've got reason to believe either Liam or Daniel will do a better job. And if the data doesn't show that, then they've got to go back to the drawing board. And then that's when, maybe you're talking a Hadjar or a Wasser from Super Formula, or an Arvid Lindblad, who's in F3 right now. Time will tell. Right, okay, I think we're done. That's about 40 minutes, which I'd say is about right. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate you all taking the time. Don't forget to like the stream. Subscribe on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. And make sure you listen audio only, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, right? Give it a download. Give it a rating. Give it a 15 stars out of 1. All right? Love it. Minton's a kip downstairs. Yeah, to be fair, I've not actually worked out how to pronounce his name properly. But yeah, thank you all for coming. Appreciate you taking the time. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good and ciao adios. I'm done. Cheerio. Goodbye. Arrivederci. Bye-bye.